Hello, good evening, everybody. I take the pleasure to welcome you all to yet another Alexa Community India session. To all the voice tech enthusiasts, I hope you are safe and with your family amidst the pandemic. We have some exciting news to all the attendees. We are conducting an interesting giveaway for this session, and here is an opportunity that you do not want to miss. Send us your name and email ID in the form URL mentioned on the screen, and the team would pick a lucky winner. Good luck. Now we shall set ourselves to the main segment of the event. We have with us Sarah Andrew Wilson, an Alexa champion and Chief Content Officer at Matchbox.io, to talk on creating the world's most popular Alexa skills. Matchbox.io is an award-winning brand behind some of the most popular Alexa skills in the world. Sarah will give us some insights on how Matchbox has strategically grown and offer some tips on how to create voice experiences that will delight users. Over to you, Sarah.
Great, thank you so much. I am delighted to be here. Thank you all for joining us today. I will be talking today about creating some of the world's most popular Alexa skills. This is actually a good reminder that if you have an Alexa device nearby, make sure you mute it because I'm going to be saying the word Alexa a lot. So it's safe to say that I love voice. I love how easy and convenient it makes my life. It's very accessible. I think of all of the science fiction movies and television shows I watched growing up and all of the cool things that were in those stories that are now made possible today through voice. It's a very exciting time. Voice assistants in general make your day a little easier and a little more fun. And especially the Amazon Alexa devices. Voice is here to stay. It is part of our future, but it's also part of our present. It's here. It's not just a fad that's going to go away in a little bit of time. Voice is here and it's only going to become more and more popular. So this is a great time to get involved and start building those Alexa skills. So in today's talk, I'm not going to get too technical, but I am going to talk about the journey of Matchbox.io, how we have created, as I said, some of the most popular skills. We have gone through a lot of trial and error in our journey over the past few years, and I'm going to be sharing a lot of that with you so that you can learn from some of our trials and errors. I'll share some tools and some ideas with you throughout today's session that you can take away and start using right away after the presentation. So let's get started. So in today's presentation, we're going to go over 8 general topics. So the first one is a little bit about Matchbox. I'll give you an introduction to who we are. Then we'll get into why voice matters. Why is voice so popular and why is it only going to grow from here? Then we'll get into actually building an Alexa skill, looking at the best practices in building skills. Then we'll look at marketing an Alexa skill, very important topic to discuss because how are you going to get people to know about this Alexa skill that you've built and how will you get people to get excited about it? Then we're going to look at growing a voice business. How did Matchbox start with one developer with one Alexa skill and then grow into a portfolio of 19 Alexa skills and an entire team? So we'll look at that. We'll also look at the impact of our work. How is what we're doing and what we're building impacting the lives of our users? We'll look at some lessons learned, thinking about those trials and errors that we've experienced over the past few years, share some lessons learned, and then we'll look at the future of voice. Where is this all going? So let's get started. So who is Matchbox? Well, Matchbox.io is one of the leading creators of fun and educational voice apps. We were founded in 2017 by our founder and CEO, Joel Wilson. We have voice experiences on Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, and Samsung Bixby. We've got millions of users around the world in dozens of countries in 4 different languages, in English, Spanish, French, and Brazilian Portuguese. Earlier this year, we were deeply honored to be the recipient of 4 Project Voice Awards. We won 4 of these awards, including Voice Developer of the Year and Amazon Alexa Developer of the Year. Our entire portfolio includes 19 Alexa skills that range from game skills to education, wellness, and utility skills. So here's all of our colorful icons for our portfolio. And here's a full list of all of our Alexa skills. As you can see, there's a lot of games, but we also have educational skills designed for children ages 5 through 12. We also have wellness skills that help both body and mind. And then utility skills, those skills that hopefully make your day a little easier. So we have become known not just as a technology company, but also as a content company. So we like to say content, 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 focus on the content. This is a big strategy for us in how we retain users and get people to come back day after day. We'll talk a little bit more about this in the future, in the next few minutes. But thinking about content, we have 7 Alexa skills that offer brand new content every single day. And like I said, this is a big strategy for us. So even if we launched, say, Kids Quiz 2 years ago, every day in those 2 years, there's brand new content. And the same for those others, for all of those 7 Alexa skills on the screen. So that's a big strategy for us. Now let's take a look at why voice matters. Why are we all here? Why are we talking about Alexa skills and Alexa as a voice assistant, and why it's becoming so popular around the world? So I have a couple of graphs to look at. The first one is from VoiceBot AI. And if you're not familiar with VoiceBot, I highly recommend that you check out this website. It's there on the screen, voicebot.ai. That is the main resource for everything you would want to know about the state of voice around the world. What companies are doing, what new devices, what new applications are coming out. And there's also lots of really great graphs to look at. So here's one that shows, looking just at the United States, looking at the adult smart speaker adoption in the United States. So you can see there's 255 million adults in the United States. And as of January of this year, there were almost 88 million adults who had access to a smart speaker, and most of those are going to be Amazon Alexa devices. If you look at the bottom of the graph, you can see in January 2018, just 2 years ago, it was almost half that amount that had access to it. So it's growing very rapidly. If you look worldwide, here's a graph from Statista.com. Worldwide, this graph shows the number of devices with voice assistants worldwide. So this is going from 2019 and then projecting into 2023. And you can see that in 2019, the number of devices with voice assistants worldwide was over 3 billion. And you can see over those 5 years into 2023, it's projected that there will be more devices with a voice assistant worldwide than there will be humans. So voice is only growing. It's here to stay, as I said earlier, and it's becoming more and more popular. So you might be wondering why? Why is it becoming so popular? Why do so many adults around the world have access? Why do so many devices have a voice assistant in it? So let's take a look at some of those reasons. Voice doesn't require fine motor skills or finger dexterity. So if you're 5 years old and you haven't yet developed those fine motor skills, you can still access information. You can still use an Alexa skill simply by speaking. If you used to have fine motor skills or that finger dexterity, but for whatever reason have begun to lose that, you don't have to search for anything that has for a button or anything to click or swipe. When you're using a voice assistant, the finger dexterity doesn't come into play. You just simply speak and you can still access the information that you're looking for. The same goes with sight. Voice doesn't require sight, right? So if you are blind or if you're visually impaired, you still have access to that information that you're looking for. Voice is also more convenient to speak than to type in some cases. So, I live in Washington, D.C., and if I wanted to know how long it would take me to drive to New York, I could open up my mobile phone and unlock it and then search for the Maps app and then type in Washington, D.C. and click directions and then type in New York City. Or I can simply ask Alexa, what's the distance between Washington, D.C. and New York? It's just sometimes a little more convenient to speak than to type. And voice is also more social than small screens. It's more social. So what do I mean by that? I have two photos that can show this. So you see the photo on the left, we see a family together, all in the same room. They're near each other, they're spending time together, but they're all in their own little worlds. They're all on their own device. They're doing different activities and they're not really interacting with each other. But the family on the right is using a voice assistant. They're hearing the same and experiencing the same experience or having the same experience together. And it brings the family together. They can interact together with their voice assistant. So all of this says this is a great time to start building an Alexa skill. This is a great time to start working with voice because voice is here. It's here to stay. It's only going to continue building in popularity around the world. So let's take a look at building an Alexa skill. What are the steps in building an Alexa skill? So I have 6 different steps to talk about that we use here at Matchbox.io. But before we get to those, I want to point out that there is such freedom and fun in building without a plan. There is so much fun that goes into I'm just going to go in there and start building, and I don't know where it's going to take me, and I don't know where this is going, but you can learn so much in that, and there's freedom in that, and I recommend that you take that journey. Eventually, though, you're going to want to have some structure and how you're building and some strategy in how you're building. So definitely go build blindly, but then also come back and take a look at some of these steps. So the steps we're going to look at are ideation. So ideation is where you come up with your ideas. What kind of Alexa skill are you going to build? Why are you going to build that? We'll look at how you can come up with those ideas. Then there's expectations. You're going to set expectations for yourself and for your users. Then there's design. So this is where you actually start building the Alexa skill. And then there's testing. You're going to test internally and externally. Then there's the launch, the very exciting moment where all that hard work, you finally launch it. And then there's iteration. So a lot of people, when I've talked with folks who talk about building and launching an Alexa skill, they often think about number 3 and number 5, right? When you're building a voice experience, you're thinking about designing and then launching, because those are the exciting parts. The designing is exciting and you're exploring and you're figuring out how to put it all together, and then you launch and it's out there in the world. But if you want to have a little bit more strategy, it's good to follow all the rest of these steps as well. So let's dive into each of these steps a little bit. So let's look at ideation. This is where you come up with your ideas. So think about, what would people want to use again and again? If you think about the makers of voice assistants and smart speakers. So let's take Amazon, for example. When they created their Amazon Echo devices, they don't want people to buy the device and then kind of forget about them. They don't want the devices to become an expensive paperweight, right? They want people to use them again and again. And you as a developer can help with that. So you can, in coming up with your ideas, you want to think about what would bring people back again and again. And then you want to find a need or a want in the marketplace. So what do people need and what do people want? the best inventions have come from identifying a need or a want in the marketplace. So how do you figure that out, though? How do you figure out what people want or what they need? There's a few ways you can do that. And I've listed a few here on the screen. So you can look at other skills in the Alexa Skills Store. Go to the Amazon website, look at the Alexa Skills Store, see what's out there. There are 100,000, I think more than that now, more than 100,000 skills in the Skills Store. So take a look what's there. Take a look through all those categories. Take a look through what people are building and what they have built. And is there something missing? Do you have an idea that's not there? Or is there an idea there that you just have a slightly different way of approaching that, or a slightly different way of building, or different features that you could add? Also look at the reviews of existing Alexa skills. Sometimes it's helpful to look at those 1- and 2-star reviews on existing skills and see what users were looking for and where their expectations weren't met. That can spark a lot of ideas. If you see the users are like, oh, I really like this skill, but I wish it had this and this and this. Could you build something that has those features in it? And then also look at what you're missing in your daily life. Is there something that you're missing that an Alexa skill could help with? You know, one idea, one skill in our portfolio is find my phone. I'm always losing my phone in my house. And one answer to that is if I can just say, Alexa, find my phone. And then my phone is suddenly ringing in the other room and I can go fish it out from the couch cushions, that kind of thing. So observe just throughout your life, throughout your day, if there's something where a voice experience could help with. And then also observe your friends and family. Is your friend always forgetful about something? Are they always losing their keys? Is there some way that you could help them with that? Is a family member always struggling with their tea kettle or their coffee maker? Could you build something that could help with that? There's lots of other ways of getting these ideas, but those are some places to start. So you want to start being strategic in your ideas for your Alexa skills. All right, let's talk about expectations next. So this is where you're setting expectations for yourself and also for your users. So think about, what are you trying to achieve? Really lay that out. If you can't yet answer that, what are you trying to achieve? Think about it some more. Think about, what are you trying to achieve as you build this? What problem are you trying to solve? Or are you just trying to put a little bit of more fun in someone's day? Think about things like, do you want daily or weekly retention? Are you aiming for someone to come back day after day? Or are you aiming for someone to come back week after week or month after month? Are you aiming for length? Are you aiming for depth? For us at Matchbox, we aim for shorter daily skills that you can use every day, but they're also shorter in their experience. Because if it's a daily skill, then you don't want it to be too long. But there are lots of other use cases where the experience could be much longer and you can drill down into the experience. And it might not be something that you use every day, but your users might want to use it on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. So really think through that kind of thing. And then, of course, how will your skill help your users? Start identifying that. Really start laying that out, because that's going to help you as you build. And then you're going to want to determine the minimum viable product, known as the MVP. This is where you start small, you start simple, and you figure out ways to grow from there. So during your ideation phase, the first step, when you're coming up with these ideas, you might come up with this idea for this amazing skill that's going to be very robust, and you're going to have this core functionality, but then it's going to have all these different features, and it's all very exciting, and it's going to be awesome. But when you launch it, you want to make sure that you're building the minimum viable product. You want to start small and simple. And then as you become comfortable, you can start adding features later on in future updates. Let's now talk about design. As I said earlier, we're not going to get too technical, but let's talk through the steps of designing that Alexa skill. So the first step, of course, is to whiteboard the structure of your skill. So whiteboarding means lots of different things to different people, but that term whiteboard comes from using a whiteboard, right? So this is our founder and CEO, Joel Wilson. This was about 2 years ago when we were our very first whiteboarding session for our Alexa skill called Kids Quiz. We were trying to figure out what would this look like. We had already gone through the ideation, setting expectations. So now we were trying to figure out what the structure would look like. So you can whiteboard, obviously using that whiteboard, but there's lots of other things, other ways of sketching out the structure of your skills. So you can use, pen and paper. You can use a sketchbook. You can also use Lucid Chart. I think the link was just up there on your screen. So Lucid Chart is a way of just taking those structures that you saw on the whiteboard in the photo before, but using it as a program and where you can share it with others. There's also VoiceFlow. VoiceFlow is a really great tool. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute as well, where you can sketch out within VoiceFlow and then share that with others, much like Lucid Chart can. Then you're going to determine the components for that MVP, the minimum viable product, and for later versions. So, I talked about, you might have this really robust idea for this really complex skill, and it's very exciting. You're going to want to determine which components are for your MVP, for your initial launch, and then which ones are specifically for those later versions. So take good notes on those. You're not going to forget about the robustness of your idea and all those additional features, but you're just going to determine what you're going to start with here. Then you're going to look at the personality or persona of your skill. So this is what you want your users to feel when they're interacting with your skill. So do you want them to feel like they're interacting with a beloved family member? Or do you want them to feel like they're interacting with a polite stranger or an authority figure? There's dozens of possibilities to choose from. It's just helpful to think that through. In general, for us at Matchbox, we think of ourselves as a friendly, welcomed guest in your home, where you look forward to having us. We're friendly. We're hopefully a little fun. You might learn a little something while we're visiting you, but that we also don't overstay our welcome. We really focus on shorter interactions and shorter experiences because we don't want to overstay our welcome. We're the friendly, welcomed guest. But like I said, there are dozens and dozens of personas to choose from, to think about. So at this point, you get to start writing. This is super exciting. This is where you write your code in your text editor, your IDE, and you start writing your script. Now, if you don't code, it's totally fine because there are several tools out there, no coding tools, like I mentioned VoiceFlow earlier. So voiceflow.com allows you to build a very robust Alexa skill without knowing code. And then in the conversational script, I call it a script. At Matchbox, we consider it script. This is where you determine the actual words, right, that your Alexa skill will say, and then what your users say back. So we literally write it like it's a movie script. So at the beginning, it'll say, user says this invocation, and then Alexa does this. User says this. Alexa plays this sound or has this interaction. User then says this, or user says this. And then if user says that, we redirect somehow and bring them back in. It's literally a script. So you're writing it out. And once you write out that script, you are then make sure that you also use it with another human, another person, so that you're each playing the role. And if the human, the user, whoever's playing the user role, says something unexpected, that's something to think about and how you're going to incorporate. How will Alexa, how will you determine how to field that type of response? And then you're going to combine all of this. Again, if you're using voice flow, you can combine all of this in the same voice flow. If you're using, you can use voice flow, and then a couple of other ways like Airtable or Google Sheets to put that script in that the code can pull from. Karthik, you've joined us.
Hey, Sarah. So yes, I think so far you have been talking about quite a bit of how to get through the ideas and the design part of the skill. So there are a couple of questions we've got from the audience, and more of a point per se. And I think that specific point struck out with a lot of developers is Akash Agrawal says that I have this exact problem where I have a great idea, and by the time I submit it for certification, it would be usually 5% of what I had planned for the skill, right? And what's happening per se there is, how does one really determine that, okay, this is the point when I should kind of get the skill to certification? Because in a perfectly ideal world, you could just go around, uh, you know, uh, just building the skill for whatever time you want to go on building.
Yeah. So you could spend 2 years building a skill to make it as robust as you want. But there's a lot of value in building that MVP and getting it out into the real world and learning from the initial users. And we'll actually get to this in a couple of slides, where you're getting that feedback and you're learning from the initial users, and you're learning, oh, actually, that other feature that I really wanted to build in, that actually is not what people want out of this. They actually want something else. So that's why it's important not to put in all the big features, spend all that time when you don't really know yet what your users are going to want, you know? So, and it also depends on your own sanity. Do you really, do you want to spend a year building something really robust and then not knowing how it's going to go over? So,
and that brings to another question, right? And I know when we set up this talk, you were of the opinion that, hey, this is not going to be technical, but there is kind of like a technical versus content kind of question that I want, that someone's asked. And the question is, if you were to choose between building a robust code base versus having great content in your skill, what would you choose or give preference to? That's a hard one.
I would not choose. If you have to choose, you're doing it wrong. Sorry. Sorry, I wouldn't choose. You have to have both. You have to have excellence in code. You have to have excellence in content.
Right.
The user will not care how clever or how clean your code is if the content isn't interesting. And the user will not care how amazing your content is if they keep getting stuck in a loop. You know, the user honestly doesn't care. The user just wants to have a seamless, interesting interaction. So you really have to go for both. You have to have excellence in both.
Got it. And I think with that, I'll just remove myself from the screen and hand it over back to you. And once I have some more questions, if you have some questions for Sarah, please let us know in the chat, and we'll bring it up in some time again. But back to you again, Sarah.
Great. Thanks, Karthik. Those are great questions, so keep them coming. Keep me on my toes. Okay. So after we just talked about design, after you have gone through ideation, you have gone through the setting the expectations, and you've gone through all the design aspect. Now it's time to test. This is where you test with human beings. This is where you test internally and externally. So let's take a look at that. So to test internally, of course, in the dev console, you're going to be testing all the time anyway, right? Just to make sure that things are working as you had expected. And then eventually you want to test internally with someone else by your side, so that you're in the dev console and they are giving you responses that you're providing into the console, that just to see if your friend sitting next to you can break it, to see if there's anything unexpected that that might come up. That would be really good to know. Once you've tested internally to make sure everything's working as expected, then you're going to test externally, as I said, with real people. This is where I always get nervous because now it's kind of out there. It's not public yet, but it's out there and people are starting to use it, and we're starting to learn from how they're using it. So there are two ways to test externally. One is a beta test. Some people call this a beta test. So the beta test is where you collect email addresses of people who are willing to be testers for you. And then you submit that to Amazon. Amazon sends out the emails to folks with instructions on how to access it. And then these beta testers test out your skill in their own home, on their own devices. And then they submit feedback to you, hopefully through a survey that you've designed. But sometimes it could just be in an email. They send an email back after they've used the skill for maybe a week or so. And so that's one way of testing externally. And then the other way is through a focus group. Pre-pandemic, you could do this in person, but it's possible to do it virtually as well. This is where you have a group of people who are using it. Sometimes it could just be one person, but the difference is that you're observing them. You are watching them as they use your skill, and you're not prompting them. You're just seeing how they navigate it. It is very telling to see how folks navigate this kind of thing. So the difference between a beta test and a focus group is the beta test is people are using it on their own, kind of privately, and then they submit feedback to you. The focus group is where they're using it in front of you or virtually, and you're observing and taking notes from there. Okay, after you've done the testing and you've learned from the testing and you've made some updates because you've learned some things through all that testing, you made updates to your skill, it is time to launch. This is very exciting. So you want to submit for and hopefully pass certification, right? So certification, depending on time of year, depending on where you are, it could take a couple days, it could take a couple weeks. It just really depends on when you submit. And if you don't pass certification the first time, it's okay. A lot of skills don't pass the first time. Amazon just wants to make sure that you're hitting certain standards. So in the email back, if you don't pass, they'll tell you, and they often tell you why you didn't pass. So you can go in and kind of fix things, and then you resubmit. If you have to resubmit a couple times, again, don't worry, it's fine. Like most of us have to resubmit a couple times before it passes. And then once you pass certification, it's live, it's out there, it's in the wild. People get to now start using it. The public gets to start using your Alexa skill. This is what we call a soft launch. This is where you're not really going to tell too many people that it's out there. You're going to tell friends and family and whoever else so that they can start using it. And then you can start watching the analytics of those early users and look at any initial reviews that come in and start learning how those users are navigating your Alexa skill. I'm going to talk more about analytics and reviews in our next section. But those early analytics can be very telling. And then at that point, you get to relax. You get to forget all about your skill. Your work is done, all done. You get to forget about it. You get to just forget about your skill. I'm joking. Don't forget about your skill. You do not get to relax. You do not get to forget about your skill. Don't be one of those developers that abandons your skill, that forgets all about it, because there is another step that comes up. And that next step is iteration. So your skill is out there in the wild. People are using it. You're tracking those analytics. So now what? So you're tracking those analytics. There are lots of different metrics that you can track. To track analytics, we use Mixpanel and Amplitude, but there's lots of other tools that you can use. You can also track in the Dev Console. There are lots of different metrics that you can track. For us at Matchbox, we really focus on retention. As I mentioned earlier, we really go for we really want people to come back day after day. So we really focus on retention and daily active users, or DAU. We also track conversion from upsell messages. So folks who are playing a free version or using a free version of a skill, when they hear an upsell message from us for a premium version, for a paid version, those who convert from the free version to the premium version, we track those numbers. So those are our three main analytics, but of course there's dozens to choose from. You just have to figure out the right ones for you. And then you're going to observe user feedback. So you're really going to track those reviews or any other feedback you might get through emails or social media comments, or friends and family telling you, I noticed this and I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do at that point. So observe that feedback. I will say the first 5-star review you receive is like the best thing in the world at that moment. You feel so awesome because you have spent so much time building this. You have spent weeks or months, nights and weekends building, and you get a 5-star review, and it's just the best feeling in the world. But I want to brace you, because eventually you will also receive a 1-star review, and that will feel awful. And then sometimes you'll get a couple of 1-star reviews. But what you have to do in those instances is set aside your ego, set aside some emotion, and just really take a close look at what the user is telling you. Take a look at how they, any feedback or suggestions that they're giving you, and see if you can start incorporating that. And then once you have all that information, you're looking at the analytics, you're getting the reviews, you're going to start making adjustments, right? You're going to fix those bugs. You're going to fix typos that you didn't know were there. You're going to find new ways to approach issues. You might get a review or some feedback that says, I wasn't really sure what to do here. And then that might spark an idea for you, like, oh, you know what, we need to reroute, or we need to approach that a little differently. And then you want to A/B test, or as I call it, A, B, C, D, E, F, G test, which is where you try different techniques. You might try one type of message or flow with half of your users, so the A group, and you'll try a different type of flow or message with the other half of your users, and see which one gets the best results. And then, or if you're doing an A, B, C, D, E, F, G test, you do multiple messages at the same time, and different types of messages that, 20% of your users get this one, 20% get this one, and then you decide the best course from there. And you just keep refining. So you're going to repeat all of that repeatedly. Track analytics, observe user feedback, make adjustments. Repeat, track analytics, observe user feedback, make adjustments. I will say, for one of our skills that we'll talk about in a moment, question of the day, we launched that in January 2017. Right now, it is September 2020. 3.5 years later, we are still in the iteration phase of this skill that launched 3.5 years ago. Every day we are tracking analytics, we're looking at user feedback, and we're making adjustments every single day. Okay, so now that your skill is out there and you're fine-tuning it all the time, now how do you find users? How do you find people outside of your family and friends to use your skill? So let's talk about marketing. I'm going to go through kind of a case study here. So first of all, what is marketing? I try to find a good definition for you, and I went to the American Marketing Association website and found this definition, which is: marketing is the activity, set of institutions and processes for creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, clients, partners, and society at large. That doesn't really explain what marketing is, though, right? Does that? It doesn't really make sense to me. So what I did is I came up with my own definition specifically for this presentation for folks who want to know how to, like, what does it mean to market? What does it mean to market an Alexa skill? So here's my definition. Marketing is making sure that lots of people who you don't know, meaning lots of people who aren't your friends and family, lots of people who you don't know, one, learn about your Alexa skill. Not only do they learn about it, but two, they want to try it. And not only do they try it, but three, they want to use it again and again. That's what we're talking about with marketing. So there's lots of different techniques. This is just a very short list of all the different aspects to marketing, all the different ways of getting the word out about a product or about your Alexa skill. So there's advertisements, everything from billboards to social media ads. There are media relations, so any kind of mention, TV, radio, blogs, YouTube. Then there's user engagement. So how you're interacting and engaging your users outside of your Alexa skill. So that's social media and websites, podcasts, online forums. And then there's branding. Branding is actually part of marketing. So this is your logo. This is the emotion you want to invoke. You very strategically plan in your content the overall persona and the emotion and that you want to invoke in your users. So keeping all that in mind, we're going to go through a sort of case study. We're going to use one of our skills called Question of the Day, and we're going to look at what Matchbox has done for this one particular skill to market the skill and to get the word out. If you're not familiar with Question of the Day, it is kind of what the name suggests. It's a fun trivia game. You get a question a day. So it's trivia. It's not trivial. We try to make it fun and educational. You get a question a day, and it could be about science or history, geography, literature, arts and entertainment, wide range of categories. If you answer the first question right, or even if you don't, when you answer the first question, you get a factoid, so you learn more about that topic. So if the question was, which animal has 3 hearts, then you get to guess which animal has 3 hearts. The answer is octopus. And then you receive a factoid. You listen to a factoid that tells you a little bit more about the octopus. If you get that question right, then you get a bonus question that could be on a different topic. So that's Question of the Day at its core functionality. Let's get into this. So before we even start marketing, before we start thinking about emails or ads or anything like that, we want to make sure we lay our groundwork. We want to make sure that we know internally, what are we trying to convey in any kind of marketing that we do. So we want to make sure, one, that the invocation is easy to remember and that it says what it does. So Alexa, ask question of the day. It's pretty straightforward. Hopefully you can remember what that is, remember what to say to invoke it. The goal of Question of the Day, as I said earlier, is that it's fun and educational for all ages. So that's our goal. So any kind of marketing material hopefully should convey that. Our retention strategy is brand new content every day. So we came up with a motto specifically for Question of the Day, which is learn something new every day. And then our logo is hopefully uncomplicated. It's friendly, it's bright. Hopefully it'll stand out. It's a little intriguing. So we're still laying the foundation here. We haven't even done anything in terms of external marketing. We're still laying the foundation. We take all the information from the slide before, and now we're going to make sure that's incorporated in the skill store description that we have submitted for the Amazon website in the skill store. So we want to make sure that that description tells you what to expect and also that it sounds kind of fun. We don't want to have a misleading description or a description that just doesn't really match what the experience is. And we're also going to reinforce our brand, which is learn something new every day. We're also going to reinforce that brand in our in-skill messages. So if you play Question of the Day, at some point during that experience, you're going to hear the phrase, learn something new every day. We're just reinforcing that with the user. And then every few days at the end of play, at the very end of the session, you're going to hear something like, come back tomorrow and keep your brain sharp with the question of the day, or come back tomorrow and test your memory skills with the question of the day. So we're reinforcing that. So I'm going to spend some time talking about Facebook and our Facebook strategy, because this has been a crucial part of our overall marketing strategy, specifically for Question of the Day. We have probably a half dozen Facebook pages for different skills, for Kids Quiz and for Sound Machine and several others, but we're going to focus on our Facebook page for Question of the Day. Our current Facebook page, you see the link there, and we launched this about a month after we started Question of the Day in February 2017. We had 1 follower. As of today, we have 19,000 followers. So how did we do that? So we determined the value proposition for the user to join the question of the day Facebook page. So what do they gain from it? Why would they want to join it? Then we post engaging daily content. Again, I mentioned content is part of our retention strategy, and brand new content is part of our retention strategy, and that extends over to our Facebook page. We also run Facebook ads. Facebook ads are some of the easiest ads you can run because you can fine tune who sees those ads. You can find people who specifically have said on Facebook that they like Amazon Alexa, they like smart speakers, they might participate in Amazon Alexa forums, that kind of thing. So you can run very targeted Facebook ads. So I talked about that value proposition. So we determine what will the user gain from joining our Facebook page. There's lots of things that they'll gain. This is what we want them to gain by following us. So they're going to continue learning. They're going to share and interact with others. They're going to celebrate milestones. If they just completed 30 days in a row or 10 days in a row of playing, they come to our Facebook page and let us know, and then we celebrate publicly with them. They can participate in polls, give their opinion. They can ask us questions. They can submit feedback. So what does Matchbox gain, though, from a Facebook page? So we gain user engagement between Alexa sessions because our skill is you use it once a day. There's some features that you can use more than once a day, but in general, you use it once a day. So how else can we let them know that, remind them that we're there? So we engage them between Alexa sessions on Facebook. It's also a customer service platform. This is a way for us to receive feedback, not through a one-star review. This is a way for people to interact with us and where we can very politely explain how things work, and they can ask questions. We have noticed by providing frequently asked questions and pinning that to the top of our Facebook page that we actually have received fewer bad reviews from the time we started posting that, because people have a better understanding how things work. We also build trust with our users, and there's lots of cross-promotion opportunities. So we have 19 Alexa skills in our portfolio, and if we have 19,000 followers on this page, that's a good opportunity for us to promote our other skills. So every so often, we'll promote Kids Quiz because our users on our Question of the Day Facebook page might be interested in Kids Quiz for their kids or their grandchildren. We'll also promote Find My Phone or some of our other skills. So I want to show real quick what some of our sample Facebook posts have been and how we've grown, how we have evolved our Facebook posts. So in the very beginning, from 2017, when we had about 50 followers, this is a type of post that we had. This is where we're asking for feedback. You can see we got about 3 comments. This is helping Matchbox, but it's not really helping the user stay engaged with us. They're giving us their opinion, but it's not really helping them stay engaged. In 2019, around the time that we had about 7,000 followers, we had tried lots of different types of posts, and this is the type of post that we eventually came up with as of 2019. It's very small, sorry about that. But in general, we provide an interesting trivia question. We provide the possible answers. Then we do provide the answer in the middle pane that you can see there. And then at the bottom of the middle pane, we provide a factoid that provides them a little bit more information about that particular topic so they can learn. So if you don't know, this question is about astronomical units. So if you don't know about astronomical units, you're now learning more. And we provide a link there that if you really want to learn more, you can continue learning there. We got about 72 likes on that one. No comments, but that was good. So here we are today, when we have 19,000 followers. This is the type of post that we have. So it's similar to the one before. We're providing a trivia question, possible answers, but then we don't provide the answer because we want you to click over to our website, askqotd.com, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And that is where we have written an article all about this particular topic. So this topic is, what's the term for a persistent ringing or noise in your ears? And you can see the possible answers there. So when you click over to the website, askqotd.com, again, sorry, this is so small, but essentially you receive an article that we have written. We have researched and written this, and we provide obviously a graphic, but we explain what tinnitus is, which is that term for a persistent ringing or noise. We also post a video about it. This is another way of discovery, another way of discovering question of the day. This is key, because if someone doesn't know anything about Amazon Alexa or a question of the day, but they're Googling persistent ringing or noise in your ears, and they stumble across our article, at the very end of the article, you can see there in the third pane, we point out that you can learn more about this and other topics by asking your smart speaker, and we have the prompts right there. So this is another way of discovery. Our Facebook page is one way of discovery, where if someone doesn't know about question of the day, but they're on Facebook, we have done those targeted Facebook ads. We're redirecting them to our Facebook page. Then we're directing people to our website, but someone who might not know anything about question of the day stumbles across our website. Then they're learning about our skill. Okay, so far we have talked about creating those assets, making sure you're laying that groundwork, logo, motto, and skill messages. We've talked about building a Facebook following. We've talked about launching the website. What more could we do? Think about it. What more could we do in marketing and getting out the word specifically about question of the day? Well, there are a lot of things that we have tried. We are essentially trying anything and everything to see what works. And what's working for question of the day might not work for our other skills. So we're repeating all of this for other skills just to see what works for those. So we, just to quickly go through these, we collaborated with VoiceBrew. If you don't know about voicebrew.com, highly recommend it. That's run by Catherine Prescott, and that shows all sorts of tips for users on how to use our Amazon Alexa devices. So we talked with Catherine, and she mentioned question of the day, and in exchange, we mentioned VoiceBrew to our 19,000 followers. We created an email newsletter with stats and info so that you get to see your stats every day in an email newsletter. We reached out to bloggers and reporters. If we saw there was a top 10 list of the best Alexa skills and we weren't mentioned, I would just send them an email. Send an email to the reporter or the blogger or the media outlet and say, hey, I really like this article. I noticed you didn't mention question of the day or another one of our skills. Try it out. Let me know what you think. And then if they would mention question of the day, then we would promote that on social media. We would let everyone know, and we tag the reporter and let the media outlet know that. We also cross-promote question of the day on Find My Phone and in other skills. So in Find My Phone, if you lose your phone, you say, Alexa, find my phone. We ring your phone. When you pick up your phone, you then hear a voiceover artist saying, keep your brain sharp with question of the day. Just ask your smart speaker for the question of the day. We also ran ads on a music streaming service. We ran Google ads. We're just trying lots of different things. I see lots of questions coming through, which is really great. I'm going to get to those in just a second. I first want to talk about this last bullet point down here. Created a podcast with radio hosts. This is another way of marketing, and it's another way of discovery for us. So real quickly, Karthik, I see you're on the screen. I just want to talk about podcasts real quick, and then we can take some questions. So our podcast that we just started earlier this year is called Question of the Day with Murray and Tamika. And if you're in the United States, at the end of the session, if you're playing Question of the Day on your Amazon Alexa device, at the end of the session, Murray and Tamika come on and they discuss that day's topic. So if the question is, which animal has 3 hearts? Murray and Tamika will come on and talk about the octopus. They'll tell you all these fascinating facts about the octopus in this very entertaining conversation. Then, so that's in the Alexa skill, you hear this. Then on all major podcast platforms, you can find Question of the Day with Marie and Tamika. So if you're not a fan yet of Question of the Day on Amazon Alexa, but you are a podcast fan and you find Question of the Day with Marie and Tamika on, say, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, in every podcast episode, we say, interacts with Question of the Day on your Amazon Alexa device. It's another way of discovery, and it brings people back. There's a brand new episode every single day. We just celebrated 200 episodes of this podcast. Okay, Karthik, hi.
Yeah. Wow, this is like, and I think I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat as well. This is quite informative, Sarah, and I think what I really like about how you have gone about question of the day, that's it's kind of like an entire jigsaw puzzle put together, right? So far, it's been so informative. So I've got a lot of questions coming in. Unfortunately, we cannot take up all of them, but one of the questions that did come is how important do you think a multimodal experience is for a skill, and do you think like it's kind of like a must-have for a successful Alexa skill? And I think Ashish, who asked this question, also noticed that you just added them to the question of the day skill. Was it something the users were requesting for?
That's a great question. So when we started Question of the Day, we did not think about visuals at all, because we were thinking of the smart speaker as just being an audio experience. But now, as these different devices have come out, like the Echo Show, and they keep getting just better and better visuals, we realized this is actually the future of voice, that the future of voice is multimodal. You're still always going to have just the audio only portion of it. But as things progress, more and more devices are going to have screens. So you really have to start preparing for that. So yeah, we just launched APL for Question of the Day. Before it was just very standard, a nice image and then text on the screen, but we just made it hopefully more colorful and more enjoyable. So I think it is becoming a must-have for a successful Alexa skill. Users weren't necessarily asking for it yet, but I imagine eventually they will, as more and more people have devices with screens.
Exactly. And I think to add to that, one of the things that I also noticed, and I play question of the day quite often, and one of the things I noticed in this is it almost acts as a complement to the entire voice experience, right? Like I think when you actually look at the screen device, it actually tells you how many days streak you have been maintaining. Whereas on the voice, I think it doesn't mention that. It just shows it on the screen, if I'm not wrong. So I think
we offer our users a lot of different stats, and if it's just audio, it's a lot of cognitive load, right?
Exactly.
If you're giving them too much information by audio only, but if it's on a screen, it's much easier to take in because you're using multiple senses.
And moving on to the next question, I think this was more of a point from Startup Sanatana, but the question was more around whether we localize these questions. The questions that you have, are these questions localized, as in for different country users? Are there different questions? Because it might be totally the way you use words in one language might be totally different than in different language?
That is a great question and very important. We are getting better at this with time. So we are in, as I said, dozens of countries. We are in 4 different languages. We have translators and interpreters that take our content in English, and as they're translating into the respective languages, they also tell me, Sarah, this is not going to fly in Mexico, or this topic just isn't, people don't know about this in Brazil. They'll give me that feedback. There's also specific words. I have learned that here in the United States, a baby wears a diaper, but in other parts of the world, that term is a nappy. And I didn't know this until we wrote a question about diapers, and folks outside of the United States weren't doing so well with that question. So we try to be very aware of the cultural appropriateness of our content, but I know we can, we're getting better at that all the time.
Got it. And I think that brings to another question as well, right? And I think this question was from Dheeraj, and Dheeraj asks, how do you decide? And I'm pretty sure because you've done this for the past 3.5 years, how do you decide what type of content is interesting? What type of questions are going to be
Mm.
interesting? Because if I mean, it's been quite a popular skill. That means people are coming back, and that means you've got some really great content in there. How do you actually decide if a question is really good to go on the skill or not?
That's a great question. So I'm a nerd at heart, and if and I do a lot of reading, and if I come across something that I get excited about, I want other people to get excited about that too. So I try to find the most interesting angle. So questions that I don't find interesting are, did such and such war start in 1701, 1702, 1703, or 1704? That's just not interesting. There's probably far more interesting things you could ask about that particular conflict than the exact year that it started. I've been surprised though, some things that I find really interesting or that our content team has written that I'm like, oh, that's really good. Our users don't really seem impressed by. So we just try to go off of what we find interesting and then try to make that interesting for our users.
Right. And I think it's back to you, Sarah. I think you can go back to your question slides, and then we'll come back for some more questions at the end of your session.
That's great. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for these questions. These are great. I want to hear more questions as we're going along. Okay, so we've been talking about marketing and now thinking about what's next. What haven't we tried? Well, there's a lot of things we haven't tried. So we're, things like videos on TikTok. I don't even know if that's something we should be doing, but we're going to look at that. Cross promotions and non-Matchbox skills. If Amazon would allow that, if Amazon's listening, that would be wonderful if we can start doing that. And then we have another strategy that we're launching next week. I can't talk about it right now, but it's launching next week and we're super excited about it. And if anyone in the audience has ideas on what I haven't listed, things that we could be trying, things that you've tried that have worked for you, I would love to know about those. Okay, so let's move on to growing a voice business, how we went from one developer with one Alexa skill to a team of 10 with a portfolio of 19 Alexa skills. So let's take a look at that. So Matchbox was founded by our founder and CEO, Joel Wilson, in January 2017. And today, 3.5 years later, this is our team. Look at our team. I love these people. One thing to note is that 7 of the 10 team members are women. I don't know of very many technology companies that have that, so we're very proud of that. So thinking about how we actually started, January 2017, with this one developer, Joel Wilson. So Joel, as he tells the story, he bought an Alexa device in late 2016 and wondered what you could do with it. What he, as a developer, what could he do with this type of device? So he started building, and he started with a skill called Daily Poll. It's not live anymore. It's been taken down. But Daily Poll, so as Joel tells it, he knew from the beginning, looking at this device, and the device at the time didn't have a screen, just kind of sitting there on the table, that retention had to be retention strategy had to be a very important aspect to building. Whatever he built needed to encourage people to come back, because otherwise you're just looking at this device on the table and you might forget about the different experiences you've had on it. So he started off with Daily Poll. It was going to be a new poll every single day, and it was focused more on politics. And so every day there was a new poll about politics. What do you think about this? Select your answer. And then he realized that politics can actually be kind of polarizing, and that might not always give you a good feeling when you're taking that kind of poll. And would you want to come, if you had a bad feeling taking a poll one day, would you want to come back the next day? So that's when he decided to take that idea of Daily Poll and turn it into a question of the day that was not political. And to this day, we keep controversial topics out of question of the day. So he started question of the day, and started that in January 2017, a little bit after a daily poll, and launched that. I think it was January 17th, 2017. And that started to gain traction, but he was wondering, well, are people okay with one question a day, or would they want more questions? So he started 3 questions, which is the third Alexa skill built. And that was kind of his test between seeing what type of content people wanted. Do they want 1 question, or do they want 3 questions? So the initial milestones were that Matchbox was founded. And then Joel, a few months after launching Question of the Day, he received his first developer rewards. And if you're not familiar with that, that is when Amazon sends you a check. They surprise you with a check in the mail, based on lots of different criteria, which include retention and daily active users, and if it's gaining traction. So that provided a lot of motivation. If you get a check from Amazon, that provides some motivation. So that is when he realized, he started looking at user feedback, those initial reviews from Question of the Day, and people were asking for additional content. And he figured, okay, if I add a bonus question to Question of the Day, that's actually doubling the amount of content, going from 1 question a day to a question of the day and a bonus question. So that's when he asked me to join. He knew, this is in mid-2017, just joined part-time. He knew my background as an educator. He wanted to make this educational and fun, but he really needed help with the content side. So I came on part-time 2017. I came on full-time a year later. And then we launched Kids Quiz, and that came out of user response where they said, we really like Question of the Day, but do you have a version for kids? My kids would like this, but the topics of Question of the Day are not really at their level. So we designed Kids Quiz and launched that in 2018. And then also in 2018, this was a game changer. Trivia Club. And I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about Trivia Club because this is how this changed everything with Matchbox. So looking at user feedback about Question of the Day. So Trivia Club and monetization. Looking at user feedback. Our users for Question of the Day asked for, this is through reviews, and I think also through the Facebook page and various ways that they would give feedback. People asked for more questions. They wanted not just 1 question a day plus a bonus question. They wanted more. They said, a lot of people said, this is a game and games normally have leaderboards. Can you add a leaderboard? People wanted to select their own topic. You might be a science buff, but not really into history. And then some people really wanted to play against other people. They wanted to play against a family member or, kind of have a little friendly competition. So we went through each one of those and said, well, could we add more questions? And we decided, yep, we can offer extra questions every day. And then can we add a leaderboard? Yes. So we did a little bit of research to see what other people were doing. And we decided, yes, we can offer local and national leaderboards. Could we have people select their own topic? Yes, let's offer 20 categories in game packs where you can choose your category, say dinosaurs or solar system or animals or, British royalty, that kind of thing. And if you select your topic, we'll give you 40 questions on that topic. And then could we have people play against each other? We could have multiplayer mode. So we took all of that and created Trivia Club, which is part of Question of the Day. And through Trivia Club, you get the daily question. You then receive not just a bonus question, but you receive 3 challenge questions every day, regardless of how successful you are with the original question. So basically, you're getting 4 questions a day. You participate in regional and national leaderboards. You receive unlimited access to these multiplayer game packs. And all for $2.95 a month in the United States or $1.95 a month in the United Kingdom. For that amount of money, it's a small amount, but there have been enough people who we're willing to pay that every month, that we have been able to build Matchbox. I'm going to say that again. Enough people were willing to pay that for us to be able to grow to 10 people and to grow our portfolio. So once we started Trivia Club, things just started moving along very quickly. We had more milestones. We were able to hire more team members in 2019. We were able to start adapting question of the day for Spanish and French locale. So we were able to bring on Spanish and French, not just translators, but as I mentioned earlier, interpreters, people who would help us with the content. We were able to launch more skills like sound machine, which is an ambient sound skill. And then we were able to acquire another company. There was another company similar to ours called Apparelo, run by Jess Williams and Oscar Mary. We really admired their work. I think we all shared kind of similar values and how we were building. And the founders of Apparelo were looking to sell their skills. And in 2019, we acquired all of their skills. So our portfolio expanded. And we were, in acquiring those skills, we were able to monetize even more. So we have 6 skills that, or actually 5 skills and maybe a 6th, that we are able to monetize at Matchbox. So it's not just question of the day, but it's also animal rescue, riddle of the day, 3 questions, guess my name, and question of the day. I have Pregunta del Dia on there with a question mark. So that's our Spanish version of question of the day. And I'm really hoping that Amazon can open up monetization in Spanish locales, because we are ready to go with that. So we have tried all kinds of monetization opportunities, from subscriptions to consumables to one-time purchases. We have found that there's not one size fits all. It's, we have the subscription with question of the day, but that doesn't work for all skills. So we try different techniques with each of these, but we have been quite successful with monetization. So after that, and this past year has been a whirlwind. As I mentioned earlier, we won 4 Project Voice Awards. We were able to start adapting for Brazil, a brand new market that's going to be huge, already is huge. We created and launched that daily podcast. We started earning revenue from podcast ads. We're running ads on that podcast. So that's even more monetization opportunities. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we launched AskQOTD.com. So in short, 2017, we founded with 1 developer and 1 Alexa skill. Today, we have 10 employees, 19 Alexa skills. We have a podcast, a website. We have Google Actions. We have a Samsung capsule, and we have lots more in store. So we're going to hopefully keep growing. We have lots of strategies and ideas coming up soon. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the impact of our work. It's very exciting to design an Alexa skill, to launch it, and then it's out there and you get user feedback, and a lot of times it's good, sometimes it's not so good. But what is the actual impact of what we're doing? So I have a few short stories to share. If you think about our portfolio, I'm going to show you these again. I would think, looking at, we have a lot of games, some utility. Before I really got into Matchbox, I would think, oh, these are nice little experiences for people to enjoy, to make their day a little better. Oh, that's nice. But it actually runs a lot deeper, and I'll show you why. So here are 4 short stories I just want to share with you. One is from a user named Jane, who's on our Facebook page. She's a fan of Question of the Day. In one of our milestone posts, where we celebrate people's milestones, whether they collected their first 10 points, we'll celebrate that with them. If they collected the first 1,000 points, we'll celebrate that. One of our posts, Jane posted that she had a play streak of 650 days. And I thought for a second, it's not 650 times that she has played, it's 650 days in a row that she had played. Like, wow. So we celebrated that. And the next time we did one of these types of posts, she said she had just passed her 700th day in a row playing. So I asked her, I said, Jane, what advice do you have for other players of Question of the Day who want to get that kind of play streak? What strategies can you give people? And she explained that she's housebound. She is unable, for medical reasons, to leave her house, and that her Amazon Alexa device is a way for her to interact with others, and that our Facebook page was a way to socialize when she can't get out of the house for over 700 days. That was very meaningful to me. The next short story I want to share is that we've received dozens of comments and reviews and in other feedback from families who say they use our Alexa skills around the dinner table. So one family said, this is one mother that reached out, said her kids will play, as the whole family is around the dinner table, the kids will play kids quiz, and they learn something from that, and the whole family discusses what they learned from kids quiz, and then the adults play Question of the Day, and then they all discuss. And it's kind of a learning moment, but it's also going back to the idea that it's a social interaction, as we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. And that, to me, just thinking about families playing our experiences around the dinner table together, that's also meaningful. The next story I want to share is about Margaret. These are all real names, by the way. I'm not showing their last names, but these are their real names. Margaret was a fan of Sound Machine, which is our ambient sound skill that has dozens of sounds to choose from. And you get to select your preferences, whether you want your favorite sound to play for an hour or for 10 hours. And Margaret had gone through all of these sounds and asked us if we could add a sound for her. And that would be a sound, she wanted to hear a sound of children playing. She said she had recently moved into a retirement community, which is all adults. And she didn't get to hear neighborhood children play anymore. And she asked us if we could add that sound. So of course my answer is yes, yes, Margaret, we're gonna add this sound for you. So we reached out to our audio engineer, and we're working on that right now. We're working on creating that sound for her and for anyone else who might like that sound of, children playing in the background. One last story to share is about, is about Ian. Ian was a frequent commenter on our Facebook page, and Ian was a little cranky. He had lots of opinions about how we could be doing things better. He didn't like this question. He didn't like how we worded this. He didn't like our grammar here. He had lots of feedback to provide. But I would hear from Ian about once a week for probably half a year. And I was always very gracious and try to be polite. Then I realized one day that I hadn't heard from Ian in a while. He was commenting about once a week. I hadn't heard from him in a while. A few weeks later, I got a private message from a woman who said she was his granddaughter. She mentioned him by name, that she was his granddaughter, that Ian had increasingly become isolated in his later years, isolated from his family and from the outside world, but that he had bought his granddaughter, who was going off to university, an Alexa device, and they would play Question of the Day, and then they created a family chat, a group chat, where the whole family would discuss that day's question of the day. And the granddaughter said that Ian had just died, and forgive me if I get a little emotional about this because it's very meaningful to me, but Ian had just passed away, and the granddaughter was just thanking us because she said Ian, her grandfather, had just become increasingly isolated, and this was a way for them to communicate again through one of our skills. So that really felt good to know that kind of impact that we were having. Okay, so my call to action to everyone watching is think about it. What can you do to make a positive impact in someone's life through an Alexa skill? How can you make their life a little enjoyable? How can we make their life a little easier? How can you bring positivity into their life through your Alexa skill that you're building? Okay, real quick, we have some lessons learned that I want to discuss. As I mentioned earlier, we've been through a lot of trial and error in building Matchbox. We've made a lot of mistakes that anyone would make, and you learn from them. So I wanted to share some of those. So number one is give users a reason to come back. As I mentioned, that's been our focus from the very beginning. Whatever you can do to help users remember to come back, where they want to come back, make a really enjoyable experience, and then remind them about how to come back and why they should come back. Make data-based decisions. So we talked about analytics earlier. We talked about looking at all these different metrics. Make decisions on how to enhance your Alexa skill and add what features to add, not based on a hunch, not based on, ooh, I would really like this, but based on what your users are telling you. Look at when they drop off in a session. Is there a particular point where a lot of users just happen to drop off? What's happening in that part of your skill? Make your decision based on that. And then also on retention. If people aren't coming back after the second time they use your skill, figure that out. Why would that be? What can you do to prompt them to come back a third time? As we talked about earlier, both content and execution must be high quality. Someone asked earlier, if you had to choose between the two, which would you choose? And I wouldn't. I just wouldn't build if I had to choose. You want to have both high quality content and that high quality execution to have a successful Alexa skill. And then you want to adapt for different locales and ages. We talked about this a little bit earlier with one of the questions, a really great question. You want to adapt for different locales and make things culturally appropriate and use terms that are used in that particular locale. We are getting better at this all the time. We're not perfect, but we're getting better at that. Also, ages. I want to talk about ages real quick. If you're making a skill for kids, keep in mind that a 5-year-old is very different than an 8-year-old, who would be very different than a 12-year-old. So keep that in mind as you're building, that if you're building a children's skill and it's for ages 5 through 12, really make sure that it's actually appropriate for a 5-year-old and that it's actually appropriate for a 12-year-old. The way we approach this in our skills is that we have different levels available for 5-year-olds versus 12-year-olds. And then the content in each of those levels is age appropriate and developmentally appropriate. And then the hardest lesson to learn is to not be afraid to stop a project and move on. It's so hard to do. If you've spent months working on a project and it's just not working, or you just can't figure something out. We actually did this last year, maybe 2 years ago. We had a very robust skill that we still really want to do, and we'll probably still do it. We just have to rethink it. It just got very cumbersome. And we got to the point where we just had to say, this is enough. We actually have to move on because this is going to drag us down. This is going to slow us down in our progress. So don't be afraid to stop and move on. All right, we're at our last topic. This is very short. I just want to talk about the future of voice. What does the future look like? Well, we can look at science fiction a little bit to help us answer that question. So for those of you who might be familiar with Star Trek and all the Star Trek different movies and TV shows, there is a centralized voice assistant computer. You just say, wherever you are in the ship, the captains can say computer, and then the computer provides the information that you need. It is hidden. It is not obtrusive. It does not butt in. It only comes in when you prompt it, and it provides the information that you seek, and then it kind of goes back into the background. That centralized voice assistant is the future. Then we have Iron Man in the center here. For those of you who might not be familiar, this is Iron Man, the superhero that is created by the character Tony Stark. Tony Stark runs Stark Industries, and he builds lots of technologically advanced gadgets, including Jarvis. My colleague Alarna Che here at Matchbox really likes to use Iron Man as the example of the future of voice, because Jarvis is the voice assistant in AI that Tony Stark has built, and Jarvis understands emotion, sarcasm, tone. Jarvis is also built into the armor of Iron Man, so it's a wearable. Jarvis is a wearable. That's the future of voice. So we're gonna more and more often you're gonna see more gadgets that you can wear that have Alexa in them. And then of course our two robots over here on the right, we have R2-D2 and C-3PO from Star Wars. Lots to be learned from these two in terms of voice. First one is, if you think of these two robots have different inventors. They are run presumably by different companies, and yet they can communicate with each other, right? It's not that they don't not recognize each other. They don't say, oh, I'm not by your inventor, so I'm not going to interact with you and communicate with you. They're an example of interoperability, which is the future. This is where we're going, where it doesn't matter who built the device, but the devices can talk to each other and will understand you regardless of if you use the right invocation or that kind of thing. Also, if you think about C-3PO, C-3PO can speak 6 million languages. But to find your language, you don't have to go into settings, scroll through a list of 6 million languages to find your language. You just speak to C-3PO and he automatically speaks back to you. He understands your culture, he understands your language, he understands what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and it just feels seamless. It feels like a very natural interaction. The difference between him and Jarvis with Iron Man is that C-3PO doesn't understand sarcasm or humor very well, and Jarvis does. But these give us some glimpse into the future of voice. So I would love to hear what everyone else thinks about the future of voice, or about anything else that I've presented. This has been a lot of fun. There have been great questions that have come through earlier in our chat. If you'd like to reach out to me, there are lots of different ways to email, Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm very active on all of those, so feel free to reach out.
Wow. I think, Sarah, at that point when you were talking about the stories, I literally got some goosebumps. Really, really meaningful stuff that you've been building at Matchbox. And I think the impact and seeing the impact on real users is something that is a fulfilling part of my job as well. Like I'll just give it a small anecdote here where we've been working with a lot of skills, and one of the skills is a skill that just makes like a lot of animal sounds, right? And one of my professors reached out to me, and they had like a 2-year or a 3-year-old kid, and they mentioned that instead of spending a lot of time on their screens, they spent a lot of time on talking to Alexa because Alexa was giving them those animal sounds, right? And I think that's where all of these impact really makes your work fulfilling, because this is like a totally new paradigm that we are developing for.
Oh, indeed, yes, and that's I hadn't anticipated that aspect of this work. I was really, when I got started, I was very intrigued by building and what could we do with this and all the use cases. I hadn't thought about the actual impact on the user.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a really touching story that you shared. We've got a lot of questions, and I know we are almost out of time here. So I'll just quickly ask you a couple of questions that came in from developers, and a couple of questions that I had. So one of the questions that was asked is, I think this was from Lakshmi. It was basically, in an ideation phase, what is the key aspect to concentrate so that to make sure that the skill works once built, and what to focus on in the ideation phase? What would you say?
To make sure that it's useful. Whatever you're building is useful or helpful or fun, that it adds value to someone's daily life, that
Right.
it makes their life easier, and or more fun.
Got it. Another question, and this was your learning. I think this was the last learning that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
As an indie dev, how do you validate if your skill is good enough or not? If it doesn't go viral as we expect all our skills to go and get very low numbers despite you spending months on it,
Yeah.
when do you decide to pull the plug on that skill?
So that goes back to expectations, which was the second step in building, which is setting the expectation for yourself and for your users. So you have to set that for yourself. How will you define success for yourself? So question of the day, of course, is quite popular, but we have several other skills in our portfolio that we are very proud of that have nowhere near the number of users, but we keep them in our portfolio because the users that use them like them, and we feel like it's a little bit of positivity out in the world, and we want that to be part of our portfolio. So it's really up to you how you're going to define success. Are you doing this only to become viral? And if so, that's improbable for most people to create something that goes viral. So how else will you feel good about your work? That's my first thought.
Got it. And one of the questions that was asked is like once a skill goes live, and like in case of question of the day, you've got a huge user base. What should be the major focus on when trying to retain some of those users? What specific things, or rather, the question asked was, what can we do to kind of retain those users? And do these users appreciate more content, or do they appreciate more features? What has your learning been in that sense?
So the first question is, if you lose users, how do you gain them back? Is that the question?
Exactly. Yeah. How do you rather retain these users by not letting them drop off of your funnel?
Yeah, so a lot of trial and error. And it really depends on the skill too. It really depends. So that's where you really want to watch your metrics and see where people are dropping off in the session. And that's where, if you see lots of people are having to drop off at a certain point, figure out what's happening at that point. There's something, there might be a word that you're using. There might be some glitch that you don't know about. I will say this was a very fascinating discovery for us. Thinking about changing words, that one word can make an impact. We had an upsell message where we were trying to convert people into Trivia Club, and we were getting some traction, but it wasn't really what we were hoping for. So we did a lot of A/B testing, or ABCDEFG testing, and we changed in one of those messages, we changed one word in the upsell message, one word, and we got 14% more conversions by changing one word. So that worked for that instance with that particular skill, but that's really where all of those A/B testing capabilities come in, so that if you're not gaining traction where you hope you would, start tinkering, start fine-tuning things and testing and seeing what works.
So I think the answer to that, to safely say, is that to do more A/B testing and just tinker around and see where users are dropping off.
Yeah,
and kind of go around that path.
I agree.
Right.
And that really goes back to the iteration part, that when you launch, remember, launching isn't the final step. The final step, there actually isn't a final step, because you're constantly iterating after that. You're constantly tracking and tweaking. And like I said earlier, with question of the day and other skills that were launched 2 or 3 years ago, we're still fine-tuning them to this day. We're still tweaking and seeing what works.
And one curious thing that I mentioned is when you spoke about analytics, you focus more on the daily active users as compared to more of a monthly active users kind of a strategy. Could you talk a bit more about this and how the strategy works for you?
Yeah, so because we have question of the day, animal of the day, riddle of the day. I think there's another of the day that I'm forgetting right now. Riddle of the day. Well, and then there's also there's pregunta del día, question du jour, the other question of the day type skills that are in different languages. so the whole point of those are that we want you to come back day after day. And we think that's a component early on, a metric that Amazon used for developer rewards. We think. So we really focused on that because it's exciting to get a check from Amazon in the mail. We originally, I think, were looking at monthly active users, but then we gained such traction that we really wanted to start fine tuning, like we just talked about, and look at the daily, what's happening on a daily basis. And if we're losing people from day to day, why? We want to know why. What do we need to do to fix that? If you're tracking monthly active users, it's harder to figure out what's happening if people are dropping off from one month to the next. It's not as in the moment. And daily is in the moment. You can figure out more quickly what's happening.
Got it. And I think one last question that I would like to ask you, and this is something that I have typically seen developers struggle with, and this is kind of like a question that keeps coming to us every now and then. For Matchbox, you were lucky enough to get into the game pretty early, like somewhere around 2017. But having said that, you have been able to replicate some of most of those success with the skills that you have launched recently as well, right? So if someone were to start developing skills just a year back or even today, right? How do you think they could still go ahead and replicate a success like question of the day? And if yes, what would you think would be the? I know you have spoken about it in the entire past 1.5 hours, but do you think it's possible? That's the first question. And if yes, where should they start?
Ooh, if I knew where you should start, I would go start there right now. I would go start building in that area right now. So this kind of goes back to what you asked earlier, or someone asked earlier about multimodal. I would really focus on see what you can do with graphics. I think that is going to be the next, I think the next big hit or the next viral, I don't want to say viral, but the next.
Especially not in these times.
Oh gosh, yeah, right. sorry, yes. But I really look at what the capabilities there are, because if you have really amazing visuals, that's really going to catch people's attention. Also look at Amazon just had this big announcement on Thursday that showed all these different devices. Very exciting. And there's one that I keep going back to and I keep thinking about, which is the new Echo Show that will follow you. It swivels around. So it follows your voice, the screen swivels around and follows you as you move around the room. And I think there's so many new use cases with that. So I would go check out the new products that were just launched or just announced and see what could I do with that? What could I do with that motion? Why would someone want a screen to be following them? And what could I build that would work with that?
And as an addendum to that, we are running a hackathon called as the Beyond Voice Hackathon. I think that would be a good way to get started as well. Just participate in the hackathon and build stuff for EcoShow 10 using our motion sensor APIs. And like Sarah mentioned, right, you can kind of move the entire device and get it moved through a skill as well. So I think really exciting stuff there. Well, you know what, Sarah? I think I could keep on asking more and more questions to you, but we are almost out of time here. But thank you so much for taking out time today and speaking to us. This talk specifically, I know for sure, has given a template to our developers to kind of go around and, kind of think holistically about a skill, right from starting and to end. Well, there is no end per se. Yeah. You just have to keep on going into a cycle. But having said that, thank you so much for that.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. I love the questions, and hopefully I've said something that has been helpful to folks as they start building.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Karthik. Well, that was really amazing. So all the attendees, we had conducted a contest where all the users had to guess which speaker was going to speak for today's session. And we got about 37 correct answers, but only one fast answer is going to take the prize home. So the winner is Elaine. Congratulations to Elaine. Okay. Well, we're sure that all the attendees have submitted their names and ID in the form because it is time to announce the lucky winner. And I invite Ashish Jha to announce the winner. Over to you, Ashish.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in today. Earlier in the session, we announced that we are going to give away AWS credits to help you along your Alexa dev journey. Let's ask Alexa who the lucky winner for today's giveaway is. Alexa, open community winner.
Welcome to Alexa Community India. Would you like to pick today's winner for giveaway?
Yes,
Here is the winner, Startup Sanatan Venkat.kl.
thank you, Alexa.
Thank you, Ashish. Well, with that, we've reached the end of the session for today, and it sure has been really interesting. I thank our entire team of Alexa Community India and all the participants for making this conference a successful one. Thank you, attendees, for showing the kind of enthusiasm you have and joining us today. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great evening and stay safe.